This week is Fertility Awareness Week, focusing on the hidden stories of people facing fertility struggles. And nobody knows that more than our first guest. Now, in 2021, five-time Olympic medalist Dame Laura Kenny had a miscarriage, closely followed by an ectopic pregnancy where she almost lost her life. Now, Laura and husband Jason have two gorgeous boys. Look at that, so adorable. And she's here to share her story with us. Please welcome Laura Kenny.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you for coming. It's so important, isn't it? I think whenever... I always think of people watching that are going through similar things with stories like this, because it really does help, doesn't it? It's nothing like hearing somebody else's struggles with fertility. And, I mean, your first baby, Albie, was a bit of a dream, right? The pregnancy, everything?
Yeah, like, total dream. Like, honestly, if you wrote it down, that would be what you wanted. I mean, we started trying almost immediately after the 2016 Olympics, before we were married, but obviously we were getting married within the 4 weeks. And then,
no judgment. You've just been talking about one-night stands.
And then, 2 months later, we were pregnant. And it was, like, seamless. Like, I didn't have really any symptoms. Like, I think I threw up once in the whole 9 months. Even the labour, like, I only pushed for 45 minutes and he was here, you know? It was all just an absolute dream. And then it was just so different, obviously, the next time round, like, completely different.
Yeah, and that makes it all the much harder, I think, because you think, oh, well, I've done this and it's great and it's really easy.
Definitely.
But it started, you knew there was something wrong when you started to bleed.
Yeah.
And then you called your mum, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, to be honest, like, the whole kind of, like, one thing after another was just awful. So I was actually working at the time and I was doing a presenting gig, which meant I was standing up, like, I was on my feet the whole time, in Mallorca, so away from Jace. And I knew what was happening, but, like, what do you do? Like, what do you do in that circumstance? I didn't know. It was the first... I mean, I was naive because the whole first pregnancy, I'd never even thought I'm going to lose him. The whole time I was like, this is easy, like, this is happening for us. I'm like a baby-making machine, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, this time, because it was so different, I never thought it would happen to me. And so I knew what was happening. Like, there was too much blood for me to think of anything else. But you still live in hope. Like, for the whole time, every time I went to the toilet, I was like, it will stop. Of course it will stop.
Sometimes there's bleeding.
Yeah, and that's what everyone says. And so I was like, it will be OK. But it just got worse and worse. And it was so lonely for me because I didn't know what to do. Like, in that circumstance, I didn't know who to speak to. And so I rang my mum. And so I picked up the phone to my mum and I said, Mum, we wanted to wait till Christmas. This happened in the November. We wanted to wait till Christmas to tell them, you know, like, unwrap a stocking with the baby's name on or something, you know? And so I had this idea, so I didn't tell them. And I had to ring her and say, Mum, I know I've not told you you're having a second grandchild, and now I'm just giving you the bad, but I do not know what to do. Like, I'm so alone. I haven't got a car to go to the hospital. And just everything about it was just a really lonely experience. And then my mum said to me, Laura, this happened to me. And the part of me was like, I'm so glad you're sharing it, but why did it take for me to go through it? I just wish everyone was a lot more open. And, like, the reasons for me coming out and speaking about it was to show that, like, it's not something to be ashamed of. It happens to 1 out of 3 pregnancies. Like, that's a lot. And so I just needed, like, the reassurance. I needed someone to tell me that it would be OK. So I'm glad that she did share it with me. But, like I say, I just wish it had been like the before that she told me.
I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, definitely myself. You know, I've had that nightmare 4 times. Yeah. It's the worst.
And that's the thing, it never leaves you, the pain and the grief. And I think what's so hard, and I know, and you work so hard for women that have these, you know, fertility problems and miscarriage, but it's so hard, isn't it? Because each time it is your baby, and it doesn't matter whether that's a week or 6 weeks.
It's the word lonely.
And it never leaves that grief.
No, it doesn't.
I think that's the most important thing, in a way, because I was really struck when like, Channel 4 a few years ago brought in this bereavement policy, and I had a miscarriage the other way round to yours, in that I had a miscarriage first at the age of 39. And then had my daughter, my first child. And I spent the whole of that pregnancy with my daughter so terrified. But the same thing, that the heart wasn't going to be beating, because that's how I found out with the scan. But the thing about, you know, I talk about everything, as you know, most people will know. But miscarriage, I shared it with my husband. I sat and sobbed on a park bench next to the doctors for 3 hours with my husband. And then I went back to work the next morning and thought, well, you know...
And we're told to push on and push through as women, right when we get first get period.
That baby was a baby to me, you know, as I think was exactly the same for both of you.
I think what's just so shocking is it's such an isolating experience.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, you're bleeding alone, or you're walking out of a hospital. That, you know, we were talking about that earlier. You walk out. You were pregnant when you went in. You're going to come out with a baby. You walk out with nothing. And yet we then say to people, oh, you know, at least you can try again. At least you know you can get pregnant. It was only cells. It wasn't really a baby. You know, you actually, through something called microchimerism, you carry those cells in your body right now, and subsequently the baby you go on to have carries those cells too. You know, when I hug my baby, I hug 7 children.
And then so sadly, you then got pregnant again. Moment of real joy. But it turned out to be ectopic this time. Which, in case you don't know, somebody might know that's where it's actually in the fallopian tube, isn't it? That the egg fertilises.
So it never drops down, and obviously you can't move it from there. Like, so it's not like you can go and have an operation and they can move it from there. It's gone. Like, once it's there, they have to take it out. I mean, that whole experience for me was hell on earth.
It's really dangerous. You can die.
Yes. And so, like, my whole experience was awful because it was in COVID, which didn't help. And all I knew was, so I had COVID at the time. And I just knew I was really poorly. And there were some things that, like, I was doing. So I said to Jace, I need to get in a really hot bath because I just need something to put me off the pain that I'm in. Like, I was in so much pain. I couldn't stop being sick. And I just kept saying, you have undersold COVID. Like, this is... It's going to kill me. I can see why people are dying from this. Where actually it was the effects of the ectopic that was causing it.
And didn't the doctor also kind of gaslight what you were going through?
It was, right. I do totally appreciate at the time they were under so much pressure, like the NHS was under so much pressure. But when I eventually got in a face-to-face appointment with the GP and I said, I'm really not very well, and I listed all my symptoms, and he said, right, let's do a pregnancy test. And I thought, I'm not pregnant. I've bled 16 days after my period, like, I'm not pregnant. But you do it, of course you do. The weirdest thing for me then was, initially, it didn't come up positive. It took ages for it to come up positive. So we went through everything else, and then when he looked back, he was like, oh, actually, it is positive. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then he said to me, well, it's probably implantation bleeding. Then he examined me, so I had an internal examination, and he obviously could see the blood, because I said the blood's very different, like it's brown, like it's different.
It's like a warning.
No, but they don't listen. That's the thing. And a lot of the time.
Things went downhill quite fast, and you ended up in hospital, needing an operation. Like, you wanted your son desperately to be there, didn't you? You asked for that one thing. And the doctor said you got 12 minutes to get your son here.
So, like, my friend basically persuaded me to go to the hospital because the doctor actually said to me, come back in 10 days' time. Well, I'd have been dead. So I'm glad that she persuaded me because I'm not, like, I don't go to hospital. I have to literally be in so much pain. Like, I'm an athlete, you know?
You're body aware. You know your own body.
Yeah.
But having to nearly say goodbye to your son and not know if you'll ever see him again or make it through. What does that do to your head?
It was terrifying. Everything was terrifying. Like, the whole thing for me was just... Like, I couldn't even process it. So I obviously had all the tests. They come to me and they say, look, this is bad. Like, we'd gone through the conversation of actually I could probably take a tablet initially and it was all calm to get my blood test results and it being a lot further along than they'd first said. And so they had to get it out. So the nurse comes in and said, look, you're next on the operating table. And I could not answer the questions. Like, you have to fill out the piece of paper, obviously. And I just was like... How am I supposed to read this? Like, I couldn't even see it through the tears. So I actually got my own doctor to do all that for me because I was still with British Cycling at the time. He sorted all that stuff out. And then I said, I just really would like to see my son. And the doctor could see how traumatised I was. And she said, look, if he can come within 12 minutes, because that's when you're going up, we'll let him in. And I am so thankful for the staff that day because they did. He came in with Jason through the back door and I got, like, 40 seconds with him. Like, you know what I mean? But it was enough for him to see Mummy's ill, but she's getting better. But also for me, just to give him a hug, like, that's all I wanted.
And thank God that you were better. You know, your loss will always be with you, and that grief, we learn to grow around grief, don't we? We don't ever get over it. But we've run out of time, but I just wanted to tell the audience that you did go on to have another baby.
Yeah.
And you're fit and well now. And
I am.
it's wonderful that you've come on and shared such a private and difficult story. So thank you.
Thank you. And for everything.
Now, if you've been affected by anything we've been discussing, there's support available at itv.com/helplines.